Welcome to this retrospective slash review for BioShock Remastered. And what I'm going to do with this is going to be kind of similar to what I did for some of my last reviews, is I'm going to kind of have the game running in the background. And because it doesn't have like a auto scroll feature or just auto scene feature, I want to be playing it at the same time. So this is control I use to play the game. And the reason why I'm going to do that is basically, oh, look at that, cool. I'm just going to hit new game for now. Is because basically this is a game you can get pretty much anywhere. You can get it on any console platform you can think of nowadays, and you can get it on Steam as well for PC. So it's pretty much available all over the place. And so, having said that, there's no real need to bring up any website saying this is where you can get it and this is where you can't get it, because it's widely available. So I also want to come from my perspective. I've never played the game in its original form back in 2007 when it came out. Around that time, I do remember playing a demo of it, but that's really as far as I got as far as playing the game. So for me, this whole experience has been actually a new experience. And I will say, well, I'll get back to the story here in a bit. But basically, I want to say that personally, I was pretty impressed with the visuals of the game, and the fact that they say this is a remastered game. Um, I don't really know if I remember correctly if the visuals were that much improved per se. I mean, it is obviously widescreen, which I don't think back then widescreen monitors and whatnot were common back then. But PCs for a long time have had very good resolutions available to them, so it may not have been widescreen, but they were very high resolution games, especially even back then. So I would say, from a visual perspective, the remastered portion of this game is only slightly improved because it looked good even back in 2007. In fact, one of the things you can tell, even though this is nice and widescreen, is that some of the character models, they still look a little dated, and that's fine. I actually don't have a problem with that. So I just want to point out, from a visual perspective, the remastered portion of the game is only remastered to a certain extent. Now, having said that, like I said, it was a good game back in the day. It's a good game now. So that's all well and good. And you can tell just from looking here, from the video playing in the background, it's a good looking game. And that's definitely something that can't be denied. The music was also very creepy in a lot of places, and it set the atmosphere very well. I've got to say, the music was just absolutely, it was on point. I do like it. And the whole setting and everything, it's just one of those very iconic settings, to say the least. And it's so funny because I do remember this whole opening scene, and it makes you think the game is going to be, I guess, very wondrous. And to a certain extent, it really is. But when you get right down to it, it's really almost a horror game to a certain extent. And the story, this is what I want to get back to. For me, the story was somewhat ruined by the remastered edition. And why do I say somewhat ruined? Because on Steam, you can get these trading cards. And one of the trading cards happened to say Atlas. And so when I saw that, and they had a picture of him in his final boss form. So I didn't know how it was going to happen, but I could tell just from the trading cards in the game that you get for playing the game that Atlas was going to betray you one way or the other. So it kind of did ruin that for me to a certain extent, but I didn't really know how it was going to happen. And I guess the whole point was, most of the game you're sitting here thinking, well, Andrew Ryan is completely and totally nuts. And to a certain extent, it does seem that way, that he's nuts. But you know, that whole segment with Andrew Ryan, it was just, I don't know. There's just a lot of things that he said there. Not the "would you kindly" portion. That was kind of interesting. And when you go back and you play some of these, other parts of the game, you look at it and you're like, they were hinting at that whole "would you kindly" thing the whole time, and I never caught on until that meeting with Andrew Ryan. I was like, wow, that's really neat. But the thing about with Andrew Ryan, the meeting with him, that whole "a man chooses, a slave obeys," that whole line is just one of those things that I've got to say it's always going to stick with me because it's just like, wow, that is. I mean, it's almost prophetic, or I don't know how you'd say the best word for it, but it's one of those things that sticks with you. And that whole segment with Andrew Ryan is just like, wow, it's one of those things you won't forget for sure. Now the gameplay and everything, I thought the game controlled great, and that scene that just popped up very briefly is probably one of the few criticisms I'd have of the game because I think with a controller the game worked very, very well, but one of the things that I was kind of I wish I could have done is I could have picked and customized which buttons did what. I think that would have been a little bit better. And so I was a little bit disappointed in the fact that I couldn't customize the controls. So I will go ahead and point that out. But, that's a fairly minor gripe. I did get used to where the reload was and jump and all that stuff. It just wasn't where I would have preferred it to be, and I didn't have a chance to actually, modify it. So that's okay. It's easily overlooked. Um, the whole aspect of the game about getting the plasmids and all the upgrades you can get in the game does kind of add a bit of an RPG element to it as well, and I really liked that. It was awesome. It was great. Um, I guess there's not really a lot you can say about it other than it just really was very good. So let me think. Also, trying to think from a Linux standpoint, since I did play this completely from start to finish on Linux, how did I think it worked? And this is also kind of the point where I can't really make a previous experience remark for you all because I don't have any previous experience playing the game. But it was, I guess I would say, mostly stable. But there were two main bugs in the game that they were very big ones. And you can't sit here and say they weren't bugs that didn't affect you much because they did. And now I got around it by basically having a very large amount of saves in the game. Let me pick up the pro wrench. Anyway, I had a very large amount of saves, and the reason I had that was to basically avoid all of the crashes that did occasionally happen. And there were two really big bugs. The first and most obvious, I should say, would be just bringing up the map. Bringing up the map could basically, at least on Linux, and I'm pretty sure when I say this, it was a Linux specific bug. It could basically bring your game to a crash, not only the game, but also your entire computer, to the point where you'd have to sit there and in my case, bring up another console and reboot the system forcibly because there was just no recovering. I tried, and to be fair, when it comes to Linux, I wouldn't say I'm super advanced, but I've been working with Linux for a very long time, so I'm very familiar with commands and whatnot. So I even tried killing the BioShock process from the command line, and that didn't seem to clear anything. It just basically brought my whole X server to a crash, and the only way around it was to reboot the whole computer. So that was a very major bug, and I'm pretty sure that was Linux specific. The other one, I'm not 100% sure that it was specific to Linux was the fact that when saving and or loading, it would sometimes the game would crash. Now, if it crashed on the load, that wasn't a huge deal because you just restart the game. You would lose about a minute of time restarting the game and getting it to come back up and everything, but that's not a big deal. The bigger deal is if it crashed on a save, it would delete that save, and you would have to go back to an earlier save. And if you went for a long time without saving, you could lose a good amount of play time, up to 30 minutes or more. And so it was definitely it was a significant bug. And that's one of the things I've noticed is that even looking at people's reviews of BioShock Remastered, a lot of them talk about it being buggy. And so I don't know how much of it is Windows related and how much of it is Linux related. I just know for me that those were the two main bugs that I came across, and that's really about the only ones I can think of. But they were pretty major bugs. I have to be, 100% honest there. Do I think it would impact what I would give a score for the game? And I'd have to say, in the past, I think I've probably been a little more lenient for stability issues. But I mean, they were very pretty significant stability bugs, to say the least. And so, in this instance, I would probably say it would impact my score a little bit because the game, at the end of the day, the game is still an amazing game. Just great gameplay, very challenging. I mean, I played on hard the whole way through, so it was decently challenging. I mean, I'm playing it on medium right now, so it's like, it's like, wow, there's literally nothing. I could do this in my sleep right now. That's how little it is right now. Except that I can't hear it, so I don't know why the door's not opening. Anyway, that's fine. Oh, there he is. Slowpoke. But I would say the stability does hurt it a little bit. But the game itself was very well done. And I would say the remastered portion of the game adds a lot of features as well. And those features are stuff that you just can't get in the normal version of the game. For instance, achievements. Achievements are something that were definitely not there in the original BioShock. And I think the achievement feature is actually really good. And since I don't have my normal web pages up right now, what I will do is in the description, I will add a couple of guides that I use sporadically. And of the guides that I use, probably the achievement guide is probably the best one to figure out what I needed to pay attention to not miss an achievement. But it was good in the fact that that guide didn't spoil things for me too much, but it did let me know, hey, disable Vita chambers if you want to get the max amount of achievements with one playthrough. And it did tell me there was a way to cheese the system, and I probably could have cheesed it, but I just decided to, I guess Iron Man it out and keep it on hard mode rather than swap to a lower difficulty. So that was something I could have done, and the guy did kind of give me that idea. I just didn't do it. But so the achievement aspect was really nice. Another thing I would like to give it credit for as well is a lot of the extra features it has added on here. They have challenge maps added, which was apparently not in the original game. Because one of my friends said he never heard of challenge maps when he played through the game. So that's definitely a new added feature. Survivor difficulty. That's another added feature that wasn't in the original game according to a lot of the guides that I've looked at. So survivor difficulty wasn't there as well. So that's a completely new thing. See, there's a museum. In fact, just because I'm going to show the museum feature right now. So the museum feature is another very interesting addition. The director's commentary, I actually want to sit here and listen to the director's commentary because that's obviously something completely and totally new to the remastered version of the game. And part of my playthrough, I did show where to get those director's commentary, which is also something that is unique to the remastered version of the game. All right, cool. Look at this. So, and then there's this. This is the Museum of Orphaned Concepts. So these are things that were thought they were going to be in the game, but got left out. And so there's just a lot of really neat additions to this game that you can't get, that you wouldn't have in the original BioShock game. And if I remember correctly, I think I had the original BioShock on Steam, and they gave me the upgrade to the remastered version for free. So that's Steam is a great platform for that. I have to definitely give credit where credit is due, and it's nice that they gave me that edition without having to pay for it. Square. Um, so all in all, like I said, just the amount of improvements that they have in the game, or full controller support. That's something that wasn't in the original game as well. So adding controller support was another added bonus. So because I know a lot of people like myself like to play, I have a TV that I like to play on. So I like to play on the big screen, and it's just a lot more relaxing to do so with a controller in hand rather than just a mouse and keyboard. Now, obviously, people that are big into first-person shooters will say that mouse and keyboard is the best way of playing, and they're not wrong, because it is more accurate, to say the least. But I just think using a controller is just more relaxing, and that's at the end of the day when I go to play my games. I want to relax a little bit, and so all in all, from a whole package, I think it is a good addition. I think there is enough substantial improvements that if you played it before, I think you'll enjoy playing it again for those improvements, and that you can play it on your TV or whatnot. And so for me, I'm going to ding it for the stability aspects, and probably a little bit less for the lack of customizability for the controller. But I'm not going to ding it too much because I found ways around it. It was inconvenient, and that's why I have to give it some sort of a negative. And so, when you use a star system, everything's in multiples of 10. So if I said 4.5 out of 5, that'd be a 90%. But I want to give it a higher than a 90% score. So, you know what? I'd say about a 95%. The stability issues, they are annoying when they happen to you, and but if you take steps to kind of alleviate that by having a very long list of saves, it can save you some time. That's the biggest issue for me with the game, is just the fact that I would lose, sometimes a good 15, 30 minutes worth of playtime. And that was always a bit, disappointing. But I think at the end of the day, probably about a 95%. It's not a perfect game because of those conditions. You can't give it a perfect score. You just literally can't. But it is a very enjoyable game. The story's one of those things that just sticks with you. And I would like to point out that on my computer, I'm using a NVIDIA card. And nowadays with Linux, apparently using AMD cards are preferable to NVIDIA because it just works better, supposedly. And so if you're thinking about getting this for the upcoming Steam Deck, chances are this game will run just about perfectly on the Steam Deck. So that's definitely something to consider if you're in the market for that as well. And obviously I can't comment on stability issues on the other platforms, but I think Steam Deck, and for Linux in general, this is a game that I think it's definitely something that should be on everybody's playlist for sure. So anyway, thank you very much for watching this video. I'll see y'all in the next one. And I hope you enjoyed seeing images of BioShock running in the background as I ran around and rambled. but thank you very much. Take care.